You're listening to Supporting Physician Spouses, the go-to podcast for anyone navigating life as the spouse or partner of a physician. Here we dive into candid conversations about the unique challenges, joys, and uncertainties that come with this life. Whether you're in the thick of your spouse's training or stepping into a new season, we're here with support, insight, and real talk. Welcome back to Supporting Physician Spouses. I'm Kendra.
And I'm Katie. Today we're diving into something that hits really close to home for both of us. How to create a true partnership in a physician marriage when one person is working 60, 70, 80 hours or more a week.
And I know what some of you are thinking. Well, obviously, the person who's home more should just handle everything at home. That seems logical, right?
Yeah, it does. And honestly, that's what a lot of us default to. But here's the thing. That solution often creates a whole different set of problems. Resentment builds, the physician partner feels like a guest in their own home, and the partner managing everything, they can't ever step away from being the household CEO.
Exactly. And if you're a physician spouse who also works or has hobbies or career goals or just wants to have some choice over your own time, it gets even more complicated.
So today we're going to talk about the book Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. Now, we want to be clear, this book was not written for physician families, and maybe you have read it and thought, this sounds great, but it isn't really practical for our family. We think that the concepts can translate into practical strategies for physician families.
And this is actually going to be a 3-part series. Today, Katie and I are going to break down the framework and how it applies to physician families. And then in the next 2 episodes, you'll hear from real couples. First from Katie and her husband, and then me and my husband, talking about how we've actually implemented these ideas in our own marriages.
Yes, we're going to share the good, the bad, and we're still trying to figure it out. So let's jump in.
Okay, so let's start with the dynamic that we are trying to solve, Katie. And I'm going to ask you to describe, what does this typically look like?
Right. So you have one partner who's working those brutal long hours of medicine, early mornings, late nights, call schedules, unpredictable emergencies. They come home exhausted, mentally drained, emotionally tapped out. And the other partner, or us, looks at that and thinks, okay, they literally can't do anything else right now. I'll just handle everything at home. The kids' schedules, the meals, the house stuff, the social calendar, the bills, the appointments, all of it.
Yeah, on the surface, that all seems like a very noble thing. It seems like the loving thing to do, to support your partner's demanding career by taking care of everything, like clearing their plate of everything else. But here's what actually happens over time. The person who is managing everything starts to feel resentful. They're doing all of the invisible work, the planning, the remembering, the anticipating. And even though they know their partner is working hard, it still feels unfair.
Yeah, I think you've probably been here too, but I often get to this point of trying to balance it all. And then all of a sudden, I kind of feel like a chicken with their head cut off. And then no matter what I do to try to control the situation, it does end up feeling very unfair. And so that is interesting, is that there's this control dynamic that starts to develop. We can't control our partner's schedule when they're at the hospital's mercy. So we start to control everything else, how the house is organized, how the tasks are done, when things happen, and it becomes your domain. I wanted to illustrate this with how I reacted every time I had a new baby. So in that really postpartum phase is I would invite my spouse to essentially move out of our room. So it was just me and baby. And part of that was so he could get a good night's rest. Sure. Second, I was nursing. So I was like, I'm up anyways. We don't need both of us kind of scrambling. But a main part was I wanted everything that I left, the wipes, the diapers, the bum cream spatula, all those things. I wanted to know exactly where they were and just control the situation. And maybe it worked. And actually, I like to say I enjoyed it, but was that too much of a sacrifice for the control I was trying to take over in that situation?
So I've definitely seen this. and have experienced this myself. Although I do want to say, when my kids were young, we did not have the bump spatula, and I'm really kind of jealous because I got to use my friends when I was watching her baby the other day, and it's like, this is brilliant.
Totally.
This won't come as a surprise to you or anybody else, but physicians tend to marry sometimes type A personalities who can really kind of get in there and get things done. And we can be our own worst enemy in that because we do. It's like, okay, I know how to do this efficiently. I know how to do it effectively. I know the right way to do it. I know what I like. And it's just easier for me to do it. And at the same time, I can say that it's protective to you. And so it's really easy to fall into that trap. Maybe it starts with a newborn and you just take care of everything. Because if you're breastfeeding exclusively, what can they really do? I was not very successful at pumping. And so I just did a lot of actual feeding. That's something that my husband couldn't do. And so when the kids were little, just like you described, it was like, okay, well, I just took them, but we never seemed to outgrow it. And so I always like, resentment is this signal that you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing anymore. And you don't know how to get out of it. We start because it's protective of us. It gives us some control over our domain, like you said. And then it also feels like we're protecting them. But it can become suffocating for both people. So the physician starts to feel like they can't do anything right at home or that they're just in the way. And then you start to feel like you can never take a break from being in charge. You always have to be on. And this is where it gets even more complicated, is when the non-physician spouse also works, because now you're working and you're managing everything at home. Or maybe you have career aspirations that keep getting pushed aside because, your job is more flexible, or we need to prioritize the medical career.
Yeah, for sure. And the image in my head is just the cobwebs, right? We just kind of get stuck in this, like, I can feel it. I know that there's this tension. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where it came from. But I love that typically it starts from a really good place and a really small place. But when that resentment builds, it just means that it's a pattern that needed to be broken.
Yeah, just a warning sign. Pay attention.
Yeah, yeah. And, another thing, don't forget hobbies or friendships or wanting just some time that is yours so that you can explore who you are as an individual. All of that requires negotiation. And negotiation requires the physician to actually participate in the household management. And suddenly we're back to, but they don't have time.
That's the easiest answer to give for why more people don't do this, is that they don't have time. And it's this crazy cycle, right?
Mm.
But the question that we want to explore today is, can you actually have a true partnership when the time and energy are this off balance? Or does someone just have to sacrifice? And is that person always you?
And spoiler alert, we don't think that sacrifice is the answer. Well, at least not in the one-sided building resentment kind of sacrifice way.
I can't remember which episode we did, but my husband, he came to me, he's like, isn't sacrifice a good thing? And I'm like,
oh, interesting.
Well, yes. Yeah, it can be a good thing when you're doing it for a good purpose. But in some cases, when we, like the examples that we've described here, where it's more controlling, it's not sacrifice in what's actually the best thing for the family or the couple, because it does harm. When you look at the fruits of that, is it really good? So it's one of those things we talked about at the beginning, like it sounds noble, but the symptoms or the side effects of it aren't really what's desired. So this is where fair play comes in. And again, in our next episode, you're going to hear from Katie and her husband about how they've worked through some of this and are working through it in their marriage. And then also for me and my husband about our experience. And we don't have it all figured out, but we are definitely working towards it. So you're going to hear different approaches, different challenges, different stages of life, but both of us trying to figure out how to make partnership work in really demanding circumstances.
Yeah. I am stuck on this idea of sacrifice and what's good, what's not good. I'm like, my mind's kind of blown. All right, let's talk about what fair play actually is.
Okay, so the author Eve Rodsky created this system called fair play. And at its core, it's about making all of the invisible work of running a household and a family actually visible. Maybe you've had the experience of, maybe your husband comes home from a long day at work and, the house is a mess and it's like, well, what did you do today? He's not asking in a, look around, you didn't do anything today, but like, what did you do today? And I remember telling my husband many times, it's like, I was busy all day long but I have nothing to show for it. There's like there's nothing I can show. And so that's what we're talking about with invisible labor. All of the things that are getting done that exhaust you and overwhelm you, but you can't point to and say, like, this all got done. So the author, Eve Rodsky, she created this deck of cards, and there's over 100 of them, and they represent every single task involved in managing a home and family. Obviously, every family is going to have some nuances, and not all of them are going to apply to your family, or maybe you have 200 of them. But the point is, she's giving you a frame of reference for how to do this.
Yeah. And so there's a card, everything from groceries to kids' extracurriculars, sports versus music, to social plans, to home maintenance, to managing pets. When you actually lay out all of those cards, most couples are shocked by how much is involved to keep their life running.
Yeah, it's because it's invisible. We're not making it visible. It's just all kept in our heads, swirling about. But here's the key concept. It's not just about who does these tasks. It's about who owns them. And she calls this conception to completion.
Yes, this is a huge concept. So what does that mean? We'll use an example here. Say the task is taking the kids to the doctor.
Okay, so conception is noticing that the kid needs to go to the doctor in the first place. So it's recognizing that they're due for a checkup, or noticing symptoms that need attention, or even remembering that it's time for the annual physical exam.
Yeah, and then there's the planning and execution, actually making the appointment, coordinating schedules, knowing when they're off school or when they can be there, maybe coordinating getting the kid there, dealing with whatever happens at the appointment, and then having that follow-up.
Yeah, and the completion really is like following up on whatever the doctor said. Like, is there another appointment that has to be scheduled? Is there a prescription that needs to be filled and picked up? Is there a health record that needs to be updated? Is it an insurance card that needs to be renewed?
In a lot of households, one person, usually the mom, is handling all of that. Maybe the other partner helps by taking the kid to the appointment, but who made the appointment, who remembered that it was needed, and who's doing the follow-up?
The author, she points out that the phrase or the question, "Can you help with?" keeps one person as the manager, so that the manager has to be the one who always thinks about it, plans it, remembers it, and then delegates a piece of it, and then has to follow up on it. And that's really at the heart of mental load.
Yeah. And we all know that mental load is what is exhausting.
Yeah.
It's invisible, but it's constant, and it often is completely unacknowledged. So in fair play, the idea is that whoever holds the card owns that task completely, from conception to completion. They don't need to be asked. They don't need to be managed. It's theirs.
Sounds amazing, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now, there are 3 core principles that we think are especially important for physician families. And the first is clear ownership, not helping, not pitching in, but owning specific cards completely. This is huge because it means the physician isn't just a helper in their own home. They're a contributor.
Yeah. And second, there's this concept of the minimum standard of care. And this is the conversation of what is good enough? How do you know when the task is actually completed? And Kendra, I think that this is the conversation most couples skip. And that's what causes problems, right? Like, you didn't clean the dishes the way that I like it to be cleaned. But it's like, well, they were cleaned. So we have to negotiate that with our partner.
Absolutely. We can extend this to everybody in the household too, because, if I own clean the kitchen, but I've never, or maybe I've assigned that card, or maybe somebody has taken that card, it's my child or it's my husband, because again, fair play, this is everybody in the household. It just doesn't have to be your spouse.
Yes. Good
And
point.
that card is held by my daughter and it's clean the kitchen, but we've never had a conversation about what that means. Then I wake up in the morning kind of irritated that there's still dishes left in the sink. And I'm thinking, why can't she clean the kitchen? Meanwhile, she's thinking it's not a big deal. I'll do them in the morning. Having things spelled out so everybody in the household knows what the minimum standard is. And when my kids were little, we had these flip charts that detailed everything that was required Like when you clean your bedroom, it had a checklist. When you clean the kitchen, it had a checklist. Like it's not actually clean until all of these things are done. And that would be the standard of cleaning. But when we're talking about a minimum standard of care, maybe it isn't everything. So that would be like the total standard of care. Like this is what it means, but a minimum standard of care, maybe that's just all of the dishes are in the dishwasher and the dishwasher is turned on. But you have to be able to define that for everybody in the household. What does it mean when you own that card? What is the bare minimum that can be considered completed?
Right. So the minimum of care conversation is where we get specific. What does a clean kitchen mean? What does dinner mean? Home cooked versus takeout versus sandwiches versus cereal. What counts as managing the kids' schedule?
Yeah, those are all important conversations to have because you likely know what you mean, but you have to be able to communicate that and then have a discussion and a negotiation with your partner and the other members of your house on how to do that. And this requires vulnerability because you have to admit what you actually need versus what you think you should need. And in this process, you might realize that you don't really care that much about a pristinely cleaned house. You just thought you were supposed to have a pristinely cleaned house.
Yeah. I'm kind of in a phase right now where I'm like, I think I really do care about a pristinely clean house. And none of us are making apps. Yeah. So, like I'm saying, or maybe we realize that we do care about certain things and that's okay. And now your partner knows, and now your children know, those who live in your household.
Exactly. And then the third principle, this is a good one for everybody. Fair does not mean equal. And this is especially critical for physician families.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much chatter about equality versus equity versus fair versus equal. And there are, I think, a lot of our models out there now do things 50-50. And that's not going to happen for us. There's no way we're going to get to that 50-50. It can't be. The time and the energy are too asymmetric.
Absolutely. So in this context, when we're talking about fair, we mean that all time is valued equally. And this is sometimes a hard concept to wrap your head around. It means that the physician's time at work is not more valuable than the time you spend managing the household and the children. They are different types of contribution, but they are both essential, but both of your time is equally valuable.
I love this. And I think it's so important. And it is kind of uncomfortable for us to kind of wrap our heads around. And I think part of our physician spouses training trains them that their time as a physician is more valuable. Right? Like that's the language, that's the narrative they're getting because the physician is earning more money, they're saving lives. And there is this explicit hierarchy of, well, clearly that is more important.
Yeah, the domestic labor is what enables the physician's career. And I know that this isn't true for everyone because we have talked about in a previous episode the phrase that I know is like nails on a chalkboard for you. Like, I couldn't have done it without you, which feels hollow because, as we pointed out earlier, we know physicians who aren't married, who are alive and well, they're doing just fine. But when you are partnered with somebody and you have children, and you have this unequal distribution of the cards of what it takes to have a home, to have a family, to have children. Somebody's got to make sure there's food, that the kids are taken care of, that the house is functional. And that work has value, even if it doesn't come with a paycheck.
And then there's the added challenge if the non-physician spouse is also working. Now they're being asked to value their time less from both directions. Your work is less important and you should be doing all of the home stuff. Now that's really tricky.
Yeah, and this is why I love Fair Play so much because it all goes back to all time is equal. So the distribution of tasks might not be equal, but the value of each person's time is. And this is such an important point for each of us to understand. You have to believe that your time is equally important to your spouse's for this to actually be put into practice and to be successful. And this is where it requires you to do some work. Do you believe that your time is equal to your physician spouse's time?
Such a good question to reflect on. Okay, let's recap the fair play framework. Cards representing all the tasks, ownership from conception to completion. There's the minimum standard of care conversations, and fair doesn't mean equal.
Excellent summary. And that feels like the perfect place to pause. Next week, in part 2, we're going to talk about what this looks like when one partner is working 60, 70, even 80 hours a week, which cards a busy physician can genuinely own, the common pitfalls that derail the system, and how to actually implement this in real life without turning it into a scorekeeping competition. So if you're feeling that, okay, but how does this work in my house energy? You'll want the second half. We'll see you in part 2. Thanks for listening to Supporting Physician Spouses. If this episode resonated with you, please leave it a review. It helps more spouses find the show. You can also follow us on Instagram at Supporting Physician Spouses. We love connecting with you there or by email. If you have a topic idea, email hello@supportingphysicianspouses.com. See you next time.